There were 3 coffee mugs in the sink. I only drank one. I stood there in the kitchen, holding the sponge like it was evidence, staring at the rim of lipstick that shouldn't have been there. It wasn't hers. Hers was coral. This one was wine red and worn from the edge, the way you press your lips when you try not to say too much. She was gone, supposedly out of town. A girl's getaway. Sun and sand and silence between her texts. I gotten 2 so far today, both unreadable snapshots of cocktails. No people in them. No captions. Just silence pretending to be fun. The lipstick bothered me. Not in the way it should have. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised. I was just disappointed that she wasn't better at hiding it. That the lie had gotten so lazy. I used to think it was love slipping away. But now I realized it was respect. I wiped the mug, put it in the dishwasher like I always did, opened the living room curtains, turned on the ceiling fan, let the day go on like nothing had changed. But everything had, because in the upstairs closet, the suitcase was already packed. In the trunk of my car, the documents were already sorted. And in the quiet corner of my soul, the one she hadn't touched in years, I had already left. She wouldn't know yet. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. But when she rolled her bag through that front door, tan from the sun and tipsy from the lies, she'd feel it. The silence. The missing keys. The way the air didn't move anymore in our home. I didn't even close the door behind me. The first message came in around 10:32 a.m. Hey babe, you up? 3 words. So simple. So fake. I read it once and let the screen fade to black. I was sitting in the corner booth of a diner I hadn't been to in a decade. Back when we used to eat greasy pancakes at midnight and laugh about nothing. I remembered how she once said this place smelled like burned dreams and bacon. And now, somehow, it felt like the only place where I could breathe. The coffee was terrible. The booth squeaked. The server didn't smile. And still, it felt more like home than our house had in years. I kept my phone screen face down. The plan was already in motion. I had signed a temporary lease on the studio apartment across town under my middle name. Paid in cash. No paper trail. Nothing fancy. Just 4 walls, a bed, a kitchenette, and no shared history with anyone. The kind of place that felt invisible. And right now, invisible was exactly what I needed. Another message came in at noon. Everything okay? Haven't heard from you. I imagine her on the patio somewhere, squinting at the sun, showing her fake smile to someone who didn't know it was fake. I wondered if she'd checked the house cameras yet, the ones I had quietly unplugged before I walked out. I left no note, no goodbye, no accusation, but I took something that mattered. The framed photo from our hallway, the one from the trip to Crescent Bay, where we actually looked like we liked each other. I kept it not because I missed that version of us. I kept it because I wanted her to feel the absence of it. Like a phantom limb she didn't know she still needed. That evening, she called. Twice. I let it ring. She followed up with a text. Are you home? I'm getting weird vibes. Call me when you see this. That made me pause. Weird vibes? She wasn't worried about me. She was worried about the illusion. I knew her well enough to translate her tone. What she meant was, why haven't you kept playing your part? Why is the background noise suddenly gone? Why aren't you where I left you? I finished my dinner in silence. Just a cold turkey sandwich and some pretzels. Nothing dramatic. Nothing emotional. But deep inside, I felt a quiet spark. Not of victory. Not of revenge. Of escape. Because this wasn't about punishing her. It wasn't about making her suffer. It was about finally stepping out of the role I didn't remember auditioning for. The loyal husband. The passive audience. The man who pretended not to hear the walls cracking. I had played him for too long. Tomorrow, she'd come home. The garage would be empty. The door unlocked. The bedroom stripped of me. Her closet untouched. As if I had been a temporary ghost in my own life. She'd scroll through her messages in disbelief. Check my location. Ask our neighbors. Maybe even call my mother. But she wouldn't find me. Because I had finally figured it out. The only way to be heard in a house full of silence is to leave it echoing with your absence. And that sound, it's louder than any words she's ever spoken. She came home on a Thursday. It was late afternoon, the kind of sky where the sun hasn't decided whether it wants to shine or sulk. I was already gone, of course. Far from the neighborhood, far from the little cul-de-sac we pretended was our version of paradise. But I still knew exactly when she returned. Not because anyone told me, but because I'd seen it 100 times in my mind. She would unlock the door, dragging her luggage behind her like dead weight, already on a call with someone who wasn't me. Her sunglasses still on, her voice too loud, laughing too hard at something that never mattered. She'd kick off her sandals in the hallway. Same place every time, left side tilted just a bit outward. That was her rhythm. Predictable. But this time her rhythm collapsed. Because nothing greeted her. Not the smell of coffee from the timer I usually set before her arrival. Not the porch light left on. Not the hum of the fan in the bedroom or the familiar sound of the TV cycling through news channels I never really watched. It was just still. I imagined her pausing there in the doorway, looking around as if someone had robbed the place. But it was worse than that. The house hadn't been violated. It had been abandoned. Lovingly, precisely without rage. A perfect vanishing act. The fridge was still stocked. The plants were watered. The trash had been taken out. But the toothbrush was gone. The drawers were missing their quiet clutter. And the space next to the bed, my space, felt like it had never been occupied. I left no note, but I didn't leave her nothing. On the kitchen table, I placed the mug with the red lipstick, wash-dried, pristine, and beside it the framed photo she never knew I took. It was of her outside that same kitchen window, laughing with someone on the phone. Not laughing at something I said. Not looking my way. Her head tilted, her fingers twisted in her hair. And that smile, the one she stopped giving me 2 years ago, I left it there, framed, silent, and damning. No caption, no context, just a quiet statement. You weren't careful, and I was. I can only imagine the order in which she checked things. The coat closet, my jacket gone. The office drawer, no passport, no documents. The bookshelf, the poetry collection I told her I never read, missing. Truth is, I read it all. Twice. She just never asked. At some point, she must have opened our bedroom closet. Half of it untouched. The other half a perfect void, as if I had never been there. And in the empty space where my shoes used to be, I had left one last thing. A single envelope. No name on it. Just a postmark. Inside? Nothing. Blank paper. Crisp. Heavy. Unwritten. A symbol. Because I knew what she feared more than confrontation, more than exposure, more than being caught. She feared being irrelevant. That someone could walk out of her life and not even bother to explain why. That her story, her version of events, might never get told. I gave her that silence. And when she finally called again, this time not with concern but with panic, I didn't block her. I just let the calls keep coming. Because now it was her pacing the hallway. Her standing in the kitchen, holding a mug she didn't understand. Her staring into space, wondering what she'd overlooked. What she'd missed. And I promise you, she missed a lot. Because this wasn't about an affair. Not entirely. There are things hidden in plain sight. Things I never mentioned. Like the deposit she made 2 months ago into a new bank account. Or the fake email tied to a rental application in someone else's name. Or the whisper of a man's voice I once heard from the bathroom, quickly cut off as she turned the volume down. She thought I didn't notice. She thought I was numb. And I was. Until I wasn't. On the second day, she called me 6 times. Not frantically, not yet. Her messages still came in with a forced calm, the kind people use when they don't want to admit they're begging. She began them all the same way. Hey, just try and understand. Understand what exactly? Understand why her version of reality was starting to fracture? Why the shadows in the hallway felt longer than usual? Why the heater didn't kick on the way I always timed it for cold evenings? By the 3rd day, I knew she wasn't sleeping. She had called my mother, my cousin, even my old co-worker, the one I haven't spoken to in 4 years. All of them said the same thing when they messaged me. Did something happen? Simone's worried. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. None of them knew the quiet weight I'd carried for the past 5 years. The loneliness that builds not in arguments, but in unfinished conversations. The ones where you say, we'll talk later, and later never comes. She had become an expert at that, but now it was catching up to her. She had started pulling at threads, and with each tug, something unraveled. The camera feed I left connected to my laptop had a backup, not one she knew about. And when I opened it on my phone, just once out of morbid curiosity, I saw her doing something that surprised me. She was opening drawers I had never used, lifting the couch cushions, opening the boxes in the garage we both labeled seasonal. She was searching for something, a note, maybe a clue, an answer. She wasn't crying. That's what made it interesting. She was hunting, and that's when I knew she didn't miss me. She missed control. She missed the ability to predict my next move, to shrug off my silence as passive, to smirk when I withdrew, knowing I'd return. But I didn't, and that terrified her more than any argument ever could. That night, she posted a photo on her social media. A beach sunset. The caption read, "Reset, recenter, rebuild." She was trying to reclaim the story, pretend this was her choice. A soft rebrand for the digital crowd. But I knew what it really was, her preemptive strike against guilt. She wanted people to think she was the one walking away, not the one left behind. The next morning, her tone changed. The voicemails were no longer soft. They were clipped, short. One of them just said, "You think this is funny?" Another one, later that day, "If this is about what you think you saw, it's not what it looked like." That made me smile. She didn't even know which part I'd seen. The dinner in Santa Fe? The hotel charge in her email trash folder? The second phone I discovered in her gym bag last winter? It didn't matter, because she assumed I was reacting to one mistake. One little lapse. What she didn't realize is I'd been keeping quiet about everything. About the names she saved under wrong contacts. About the texts she deleted but didn't know were backed up to our shared cloud. About the months she said she was going to therapy but never once left the gym parking lot. And here's the twist that she'll never see coming. I didn't leave out of revenge. I left to protect the last thing she hadn't taken, my version of a truth. See, when someone lies to you long enough, they steal your ability to trust your own memory. You start rewriting history with them, just to survive the conversation. I did that for years. I played her script. I smiled when I wasn't okay. I said, "I love you too," like it meant something. But now I was building a new memory, one she couldn't touch, one where she didn't get to be the narrator. I was no longer the man who stayed. I was the man who left before she even realized he meant it. And the more she searched, the deeper she'd sink into the one truth she never prepared for. That there would be no closure. Because some doors don't slam shut. Some just drift open behind you. And stay that way forever. By the fifth day, she stopped calling. That's how I knew it was getting to her. Not the silence. That was predictable. It was the absence of pattern that began to rot her composure. She was used to cycles. Cold shoulders that melted. Fights that flared and faded. Apologies that came eventually, like trains delayed, but still arriving. But I didn't arrive. Not in her texts. Not in her inbox. Not in the way her mind had been trained to expect. And that terrified her. I wasn't ghosting her. Ghosts linger. I had evaporated. The woman who used to roll her eyes every time I tried to start conversation about us, the one who said I was too sensitive, too soft, too stuck in my head, that woman now found herself pacing hallways I used to walk. She stopped posting on social media, stopped replying to friends, started looking over her shoulder, checking locks twice, pulling blinds before dusk, because the house didn't feel like hers anymore. That's the thing no one tells you about when someone leaves quietly. The space around you becomes hostile in their absence. Every room echoes with unfinished sentences. The coffee pot still clicks on at 7 a.m., but the second cup never gets poured. The air turns still, too clean, like the house itself is mourning. I watch from afar, never directly, but through the traces. A neighbor mentioned she asked if I was away on business. Another said she knocked on their door and asked if I'd left something with them, as if maybe I'd passed her a message through a third party like a game of marital telephone. Then came the delivery man. Not for her, for me. I had set up a forward, not to my apartment, but to a private box nearby. She noticed the label on the package, saw my initials, and realized I hadn't disappeared into the wind. I was still in the world, just not in hers. That's when the doorbell rang. It wasn't the UPS guy. Not this time. It was her mother. Her mother, who never liked me, who used to tell Simone that I was too soft, too accommodating, too forgettable. She was standing on the porch holding something. A photo album, one I hadn't seen in years. The security camera, the one she thought I forgot about, captured the whole moment. her mother pressing it into Simone's hands like a peace offering. Simone shaking her head, then tears, then shouting, muffled through the glass, but I didn't need audio to understand. Simone was unraveling, but not because I left, because I left right. No anger, no confrontation, no screaming in the rain, just a slow withdrawal from the edges of her life until she stood in the center of it and saw what it really looked like without me smoothing out the corners. It wasn't pretty, and then something happened I hadn't expected. She started talking to herself. The camera caught it. Long monologues in the kitchen, talking into drawers, reading texts she had saved for me aloud like she was trying to conjure me back. I missed the way you used to sit right there. You always made the house feel warmer. Why didn't you just tell me? That last one, that was the one that stayed with me. Because I had told her. Not in words, in pauses, in glances, in the way I sat through her laughter while she texted someone else under the table. In the nights, I rolled away instead of reaching for her. In a gentle way, I stopped asking if she was okay, because I already knew the answer. And she ignored all of it. Until now. Now that the bed was too cold. Now that the TV played to no one. Now that every click of the door made her wonder if it was me coming back. But I wouldn't be. Because the moment she zipped up that suitcase and left for her girl's getaway, she didn't realize she had walked out of more than just a house. She had walked out of my story. And I wasn't letting her write the next chapter. It was dusk when a knock came. Not a ring. Not a buzz. A knock. Simone opened the front door the way people do when they already suspect the outside world has turned on them. Slowly, reluctantly, with her hand still wrapped around the lock as if it could change its mind. Standing there wasn't a stranger. It was Julian. Julian, the man she always called her work friend. The one who showed up in a few, too many photos. The one whose name had never been spoken in a sentence with mine. Not once in the 11 years we shared a last name had she ever mentioned him in my presence. But I knew the voice. I knew the laugh. And I knew the way she angled her body toward him when they thought no one was watching. Only now, he wasn't smiling. And neither was she. She didn't invite him in right away. For nearly a minute, they just stood there, her in the doorway, him on the steps, the weight of their unspoken history hanging like wet clothes between them. Finally, she stepped aside, and he walked in. The camera didn't catch everything, just pieces, enough to understand something was cracking. She poured them both a drink, not wine, not champagne like the kind she used to sneak around with. Just water. Her hands trembled. She wasn't hosting. She was bracing. He sat on the edge of the couch like he didn't want to leave an imprint, like being there was dangerous. And when he finally spoke, the few words I could lip read said everything. He knows. Her face didn't flinch. That told me everything too. Because he knows wasn't a warning, it was a confirmation. She already knew I knew. And still, she had said nothing. No confession. No breakdown. No apology. Julian said something else. And this time, she did react. Her hand flew to her mouth. Her body sank forward. She whispered something into her palms. He leaned in. She pushed him back. I watched from the feed, one earbud in, the volume turned low, even though I couldn't hear anything. That was the power of it, the silence. You didn't need volume to feel the shift. The way her shoulders curled inward. The way he rubbed his eyes like he regretted everything at once. And then she did something that shocked even me. She stood up and pointed at the door. And he left. No hug. No final glance. Just gone. She didn't follow him. She locked the door, sat down, and cried. Not pretty, cinematic crying. Not the kind of tears people post online with poetic captions. No, this was the ugly, breathless kind. The kind that sounds like choking. The kind that makes you fold in half. Not because you're mourning someone else, but because you finally see yourself for what you've become. She didn't know it, but that was the first time she had ever cried in that house without me holding her. And that was exactly why I stayed gone. Because it wasn't about Julian. It never was. He was just a symptom, a placeholder, a mirror she didn't like looking into. What broke her wasn't the guilt. It was the realization that I had stopped caring whether she felt it. People like her, they expect consequences. They expect shouting, tears, ultimatums, public scenes. They rehearse for drama. But silence? Distance? Absence? That dismantles them. Later that night, she tried calling again. This time, it rang once and went to voicemail. I had set it that way on purpose, just enough to give her hope before it slipped away. The message she left was quieter than the others. She said my name softly, just once, then silence, then a quiet breath that sounded almost like the beginning of a question, but it ended with a click. I didn't listen to the rest. I didn't need to, because at that moment, she wasn't trying to fix anything. She was trying to feel close to something she'd already lost. 3 days passed without a single word. Not from me. Not from Julian. Not from anyone she still had power over. It was the first time in her adult life Simone had no one to spin a narrative with. She had built her entire identity around curating chaos into charisma, telling stories that made her look like the misunderstood center of every storm. But when no one listens, the spotlight goes cold. And that's when the cracks become mirrors. She stopped calling, stopped texting. I imagine she sat in that house hearing things that weren't there. Drawers closing, keys turning, footsteps on stairs that hadn't been walked on in days. That's the curse of being left silently. Everything ordinary starts to feel haunted. Then, on a rainy Thursday afternoon, something arrived at the house. It wasn't a package. No box. No delivery confirmation. Just an envelope. No return address. No stamp. Just dropped in the mailbox like someone had been there. My name was on the front. Elwood M. But it wasn't my handwriting. I don't know how long she stared at it before opening it. The security camera footage shows her bringing it inside, setting on the kitchen table, and walking past it several times without touching it. Like it might explode. Like the paper might bleed. When she finally opened it, she unfolded the letter with shaking hands. What she read changed everything. Because it wasn't from me. It was from someone else. Someone she had forgotten existed. Someone I never spoke about. Someone she never even thought to ask about because she assumed I had no secrets worth knowing. It was from my brother. A brother she never met. Because he died long before she and I ever crossed paths. But in that letter, written years before he passed, and tucked away in a locked box I had kept hidden all this time, was a truth I never had the heart to share. A truth about why I had always been quiet. Why I never yelled. Why I didn't fight when she pushed. Why I let things go even when they burned inside me. My brother had been like me. Too quiet. Too soft. Married to a woman who thought that meant she could mold him like wet clay. She cheated on him for years while smiling across the table. And one day, he simply walked out of his life and left everything behind, including the pain. He vanished. And 3 years later, they found his body. Not because he took his life, but because he had died alone, peacefully, in silence, on a bench near a lake he used to love. His journal next to him, pages filled with all the words he never said aloud. Simone read that letter and saw herself in it. Not in the way of guilt, in the way of warning. Because I had never told her that part of my life. I had kept it buried. Until now. Now, she was holding proof that my quiet wasn't weakness. It was heritage. It was protection. And maybe, in some twisted part of her heart, she realized she had underestimated the cost of silence. That some people don't just leave the room. They leave the story. They vanish into the empty spaces between the words, and they don't send explanations. That evening, she packed a bag. Not a suitcase. Not something dramatic. Just a small duffel. She took only her keys, her wallet, and the letter. She walked out the front door and locked it behind her, even though no one was there to steal from her anymore. She drove away. Not fast, not with a destination, but with the kind of stillness that comes when someone finally stops performing. I didn't follow her. I didn't need to, because the letter had done what I never could with words. It let her feel, for the first time, the echo I had lived with every day of our marriage. And maybe, somewhere out there, she was finally starting to understand. The loudest thing I ever said was when I said nothing at all. It's strange how life doesn't announce when a chapter ends. There's no music cue, no dimming lights, no applause. Just a moment quiet, ordinary, when the page simply turns. 2 weeks passed. I didn't check the camera feed anymore. I stopped monitoring the calls. Her name on my phone sat there like a museum piece behind glass. Untouched, unsent, no longer alive, but not deleted either. She had vanished from my daily rhythm in the same way I had once vanished from hers. A quiet symmetry neither of us planned. But then, something unexpected happened. I got a letter. Not an email. Not a voicemail. A real letter. No dramatic handwriting. No perfume on the page. Just a plain envelope with my name written carefully, like someone had rewritten it more than once before deciding to send it. I sat with it for nearly an hour before opening it. It began with the words I never thought I'd hear from her. "I'm not asking you to come back. I'm just asking you to know I heard you." She told me she had gone away. Not to escape. Not to scheme. But to listen. Alone. Somewhere quiet. No phone. No internet. Just her and a memory of what she'd been blind to for too long. She wrote about the day she realized I was truly gone. Not just from the house, but from the version of myself I used to bring to our life. She said she'd stood in the bedroom, holding the framed photo of us from that old trip to Crescent Bay, and realized she couldn't remember the last time she looked at me the way she did in that moment. She wrote about Julian, how she had lied to herself more than she ever lied to me, that it hadn't been love. It had been attention, and attention was never enough when you didn't even like yourself. And finally, she wrote something I'll never forget. "You didn't disappear to punish me. You disappeared to protect what was left of you. And I respect that now." She ended the letter with no plea, no question, no closure request. Just a single line. "Wherever you are, I hope you're finally breathing again." I folded it carefully, not out of sentimentality, out of peace. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She gave me something better, understanding. And for the first time in years, I looked up from my life, my new life, and realized I wasn't haunted anymore. Not by anger, not by confusion, not even by what we could have been. Just quiet. Real, healing quiet. Weeks later, I walked through a small art fair in a city she'd never think to look for me in. I passed by a painter whose work caught my eye, still moody pieces filled with sky and fog and light just starting to break through. I bought one. The man behind the booth smiled and said, "Hope it brings you calm." And I realized with a soft, strange certainty it already had, because I had finally left the story. And this time, I wasn't looking back.